All right, good evening, everyone. All right, let's try this again. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, thank you. My name is Kristin Martin. I'm a Deputy Prosecuting Attorney with the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, and I've had the privilege of attending and participating in this event for the last 4 years, which is a wonderful event. I'm thrilled to see so many new people here. I am the Juvenile Community Prosecutor, and I coordinate all of our crime prevention programs for youth and their families. So if anyone has any questions, my office is at the Juvenile Center at 25th and Keystone. Throughout the course of this conversation, and I'll introduce Mr. Smith here in a minute and his area of expertise. But if anyone has any questions about the way that juvenile law is applied in Indianapolis, or how we as the Marion County Prosecutor's Office are addressing some of these issues with our youth with our free crime prevention programs, feel free to approach me anytime. So at this time, I now have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Jamal Smith, who is the Director of Athletics for the Indianapolis Public School District. He is the founder of the Lead Change Project, a nonprofit organization which seeks to increase extracurricular participation, academic performance, and community involvement. Mr. Smith believes that participating in a sport or an extracurricular activity inherently provides intangible benefits for the participants and their communities in which they live. From 2010 to 2015, Mr. Smith served as the Executive Director of the Indiana Civil Rights Commission, and he is the co-chair of the Your Life Matters Violence Prevention Task Force. In 2014, Mr. Smith, as the Tech High School Assistant Basketball Coach, helped lead the team to earn the 4A state championship. He also holds a master's degree of science in sports management from Purdue University, as well as a Master of Business Administration from Wright State University. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jamal Smith.
Well, thank you, Kristin. Does it sound pretty good for everybody? So as I walk away, I'll probably need to project myself. I have a little bit of ADHD, right? So I tend to move with the crowd. Thank you for that introduction. It's interesting how you listen to someone talk about you and you go, That didn't sound so bad, right? I wonder if my wife said yes. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. In light of, I think, the topic of the conference, I come from a slightly different angle. As you mentioned, one of my prides is having founded the Lead Change Project. It's a sports management-based nonprofit, and our focus is specifically kind of grounded in what we consider to be the power of sport, and that through that involvement, young people inherently receive benefits, and that we can support young people academically, physically, socially, mentally, et cetera, et cetera. And then indirectly, what you end up doing, obviously, is providing a benefit to the schools and school districts that they attend, the communities they live in, the cities and things that them and their families work in, and so on and so forth. So it's not a new concept. It's not like we broke the Da Vinci Code, but I truly believe in the power of sport. To that end, picture this. It's 4 a.m., 4 o'clock in the morning, and a single mother has just gotten up for work, for job number one. She goes into her boys' room, right? She's got 2 boys, about 10 years old, the other's about 5 years old. She wakes them up with this list of expectations, right? She's got a list of expectations for a 10-year-old who she's waking up, who's pretty much got to carry the day, because as she leaves here at 4:30 in the morning, she won't be returning home until roughly midnight. And then the environment they live is pretty tough. It's the mid-'80s, right? So the crack cocaine epidemic is at its height. There's a lot of unrest in the neighborhood and the projects that they live in. And she's seen it all her life. She comes from a big family. She's one of 12 kids. Her mother, as a grandmother, has got 57 grandbabies. Her 2 boys are part of that 57, and all of her brothers and sisters have been on social welfare all of her life. She herself doesn't even have a GED at the time. And well within her right, most would say, to take social welfare, but she had made the conscious decision that she wanted to go to work. So she's working 2 jobs. She's making minimum wage at the time, was, somewhere around $4.75, right? And so she wakes her boy up, her 10-year-old, and she says to him, she says, get up. I need you to get up and get yourself together so that you can get your brother together. Make sure you iron his clothes. Make sure he eats breakfast and you fix him something for breakfast. And make sure you get him to school on time. And make sure you get back yourself so that you can finish getting dressed, eat you some breakfast. Make sure you get to that bus stop on time so you don't miss that bus. She says to him, she says, I got the key. I'm going to pin it to the inside of your pants. And she says, don't you touch that key until you're literally standing in front of the door, so no one knows that you're home by yourself. And she says, you don't play around with that key. You come in, you get out, make sure the door is locked behind you. And then she tells him that she loved him and that, she made him repeat the mantra of the little code they had. When I call, I'm going to call, let the phone ring one time, I'll hang up and I'll call back. That's how you know it's me. And if you ever make a mistake and answer the phone and it's not me, you tell him I'm in the shower. And he repeats it all, say, yes, ma'am. And he follows her downstairs as she walks out of the screen door. And he stands in the screen door and he watches her walk off into the night. You see, it's 4 a.m. and they didn't have a car. So she called the bus to work every day, right? And as she's walking, she would kick needles. She would walk the same path that her boy would to take to catch the bus. So she would kick needles out of the way as she walked. That was kind of her way if she felt, protecting him from the obvious dangers, right? Then she'd go catch that bus and, she'd cry her way to work. So he'd take his deep breath and get himself together and, it was off to fulfill those expectations. Go upstairs, he'd wake his little brother up, slap him around a little bit, right? Come on, get up, we don't have much time, got to get dressed. You see, along those expectations were a list of things. Not only was it taking care of baby brother, but taking care of yourself, cleaning up the house, minding your manners. There were some external things. For example, a rule in the house, an expectation in the house was he had to play a sport every season. And she didn't care what it was. The rule was every season you pick something. And rule 2 was whatever you pick, we don't quit, so you're stuck with it. So if you pick football and you figure out halfway through the football season you suck at football, you're just going to be sucking all season long. So as he got his brother ready, he thought about those things and got him dressed, went, got him to school, came home, got himself together, ate, caught the bus, went to school, called the bus back home to school, went to pick up his brother, got back on the bus, take his own brother home, fed him, then they would go catch the bus again to go back to school for practice. He would pack his brother a little bag, right, sit him in the corner, and his brother would play in the corner while he had practice or what have you. Then after practice, they'd get back on the bus, head back home, and they would sit and wait. It's like clockwork. Mom called. Phone rang once. Stop. Then it rang again. That way he knew it was his mom. Pick it up. How was your day? It was good. Did you do your homework? Yes, ma'am. How's your brother? He's good. Does he have homework? No, ma'am. Give him something to do anyway. Yes, ma'am. Make sure he eats dinner. Make sure you read a book to him. Make sure you tuck him in bed. And then mom would be home shortly. And just like clockwork, around 12:15, 12:30. She comes home. And he would stay up. He would sit in the door where he can watch people approach, right? He would watch as his mother was coming home, tired, right? And she would come home and she would sit. And then he would kiss her. And he'd go to bed and get ready for day 2. Start all over again. And he would look at the sacrifice in his mother's face, wondering, why the hell are you doing it? Right? And he had the nerve to ask her one day, He was an adult by then. He says, you know, I played everything, basketball, football, baseball, ran track. Had a lot of people come, they recruited me. And you didn't miss very many games, but you were never really there. I said, why? He says, because I had to go to work. He says, well, I did the math. You know, I mean, making minimum wage at the time. Honestly, it looks like you made about $35 more than you would had you just stayed home. Took welfare. So she looked at her boy with so much sincerity. And she says, yeah, I could have. She says, but that's what all my sisters did. And she says, all their boys ended up as dope boys and gangsters and hustlers. He said, there's no rule book to this parenting thing. They don't come with some guidelines and rules. She says, so I really didn't know what to do. She says, but I knew what not to do. And if my ultimate goal was to make sure that you ended up differently than them, then I figured that I needed to do everything different than they did. And she says, and that was a sacrifice. She says, every day I walked to that bus stop. And she says, I would get to that bus and I would cry all the way to work. She says, I would think about the fact that somebody's probably watching me leave my 10-year-old and my 5-year-old at home to fend for themselves. And then they call the cops, right? And then somebody comes and then takes my kids away. She says, or even worse, somebody's watching me leave my 10 and my 5-year-old at home, and then they follow back up after I leave and kick in the door and do God knows what to my baby. She says, so I cried every day. She says, but you know what? It was more important to me. She says, as tough as that was, it was more important to me that you saw somebody get up and go to work every day. It's a novel concept, right? So in the midst of all that chaos, she raised what I think to be 2 fairly successful young boys, both college educated, still trying to figure this thing called life out. And one of them just so happens to be standing here talking to you today. Thank you. On behalf of my mother, I thank you. And the reason I tell that story is a fewfold. One is, in sincere honesty, it's not an anomaly. There's tons of people with very similar, if not identical, stories. But I attribute, you know, it's funny, and I think we've all experienced this. If you've lived long enough, right? You you go back home and you interact with folks who you grew up with, and everybody's catching up. And there's so many of the guys I hung around and grew up with who are not doing as well. And I've always tried to figure that thing out, right? Same neighborhood. Some of us live literally right next to each other. I'm in this apartment building. They might be in the next apartment building. Went to the same schools. Coming up, my mother didn't have an education at the time. Their mother didn't have an education at the time. Both single mothers. Like everything. Like what's the difference? Like what's that denominator? What's that variable, right? That has caused me to be here and them to be where they are. And I come to grips that I think it's 3 things. One, the grace of God. Praise Jesus. The second one was my mother and how she ran things like a drill sergeant. Now that was the nice version, right? Because that message in the morning came with a few expletives and some threats. But we got the picture. And 3, I think, was, and by extension of her, my involvement in sport. It truly was. It honestly became kind of like that identity for me. In fact, a lot of the dope boys around the way, they would, if I have any sports fans in here, do you guys remember they used to have a thing called like the Gus Macker 3-on-3 tournament or Hoop It Up? You guys remember that? So we were playing these Gus Macker tournaments, and I was a young guy. Maybe about 12 years old at the time when I started playing in them. And they would bet on the games, right? And I was like a ringer for them, because I was this little scrawny kid, came out, and it was like grown man playing, and they would put me up in divisions I shouldn't even been playing in, but I could play a little bit. And I'll never forget, like they would say, you know, I could walk anywhere and do anything I want. They say, man, Lee, that's Maul, leave Maul alone. Leave him alone, man. He going to hoop. He's hooping, leave him alone. And I'll never forget one day, we're out at the park, and we had a rival neighborhood that we're playing against, and you know they got I don't know how much money on the line for this game, and I go to make a move. It's game point, tie ball game. I go to make a play, and I made a move, and my whole foot came out of my shoe. I lose the ball, they grab it, they score, they win. And I'm nervous because I know these boys lost a whole lot of money on the game of my shoes. And they grabbed me and they threw me in the back of this Cutlass Supreme I'll never forget. And they on both sides and they throwing me in. I'm like, my shoes is flopping all over the place. And I'm like, oh man, where are they taking me, man? Where are they taking me? They took me to Foot Locker. They took me to Foot Locker and they bought me my first pair of Jordans, sneakers. And they said, don't you ever play nothing else but these again. Because before then, Mom could only afford, I wore, these shoes called Pro Wings and Voits. Yeah, I mean, it served a purpose for me, but they weren't Air Jordans. And I was so proud of those Air Jordans. But back to my mother, was a rule in the house. She would say to me, if I didn't buy it, don't bring it in my house. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I doing with these Air Jordans? Because I am not giving these Air Jordans away. So I buried them. In the back, we had a little stoop right behind the little back door. I dug a hole and I put them in a little grocery bag and I buried them, I covered them up. And she would leave in the morning before I go dig them back up, change into my Jordans, and I go to school. The moral of that story is all of those elements in the midst of all that that we grew up in, that structure that was created, I attribute and trace to where I stand in talking to you right now. I was afforded an opportunity, obviously, through high school. I played a little bit of everything, but went on to college to play ball, play some semi-pro ball. God has a funny way of, his plan always trumps yours, no matter how good you think your plan is, right? So I'm chasing my hoop dream at the time, and it's ironic because we convey this in messages that we give when we coach the young kids nowadays. In fact, we survey the kids in the beginning of the season. We never even touch a ball. We're in a classroom, and we'll ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? Now, inevitably, 9 out of 10 of them always say, right, I want to go to the NBA. And it's different for me with that response. Because to me, that's an awesome response. Because I remember when I was that young and I would say it, and you guys always heard it, somebody would say, well, don't you know 1 in every 5 billion people who want to go to the NBA ever make it? And I remember I would think to myself, well, who the hell are you to tell me I'm not going to be that one? Considering everything that I'm dealing with, I'm destined for something great. So why not be that one? So I tell the boys when I'm coaching them, I say, that's cool. Nobody has the right to take your dream away. That's your dream, you shoot for it. You are entitled to dream, and I encourage you to dream as big as you can possibly dream. However, if in fact it is your dream, then I encourage you to make sure that it's yours and not someone else's. Because if it is your dream, then I shouldn't have to convince you to come in here and work out. If it is your dream, then I shouldn't have to convince you to get the grades you need to stay academically eligible. If it is your dream, then I shouldn't have to convince you to get rid of all of the distractions that would deter you from the dream you say that you have. And if it is your dream, through that hard work ethic, who's to say you can't make it? But don't give me somebody else's dream and then camouflage it as your own. And then 2, I'll say, consider me your genie, right? You rub on me, I'm your genie, poof, I grant you your wish. and you play in the NBA. Now the life expectancy is anywhere between 3 to 5 years. I tell them I'll give you 6. I'll give you 6 years to play. Now you're 26 years old. You're done. Now what do you want to do? And the cool thing is to watch them look. And those wheels start to turn. Because you can't say I want to play in the NBA anymore, right? You've already done that. So what do you want to do? And I think the most remarkable thing about that look that they give is the fact that very few people have actually asked them that question, one. And then two, if they did ask, they didn't force them to think through what the responses may or may not be. And so we have these dialogues about, what certain professions mean and what it takes to get from point A to point B. And considering your circumstance, as true as they may be, what that hurdle means for you to have to jump over. You see, I don't let them get caught up in the current circumstance, because occasionally life does suck. Some of us get dealt better hands than others. It's a matter of fact. However, the sun is going to rise and it's going to set regardless of how you handle it. So, if you're going to be in it, then you should be giving it your all. And you can't make excuses about the circumstance. Recognize what it is and then figure ways to get around it. Kind of like in a game, we use the game of basketball as a metaphor. It's a game of life, right? We'll say, how many times have we walked into a gym and playing a game and we feel like the referees are dead set against us? The crowd's against you, the officials are against you, not just your opponents, everybody's against you, right? Call didn't go your way. Referee just gave you a technical foul. And they come over to the bench and they're kicking and screaming, "Coach, man, that's not fair. Man, he don't like us and he just picking on us." And my response is typically something along the lines of, "Yeah, all right. So now what?" Because we got about 30 more seconds before this timeout is in, and the game has to continue. So despite the circumstance that we've just identified, you've got to continue to play the game. And I don't know about you, but I came to win. Everything I do it to win. So get over yourself, and let's figure out how to beat them and them, because we're still here to win. And I've been fortunate enough to coach some young men. I completely forgot about this presentation. Forgive me, y'all. To coach some young men that have kind of bought into that. And we've done some beautiful things. I've been in Indy for about 15, 16 years. And I've been coaching ever since. My background is in sports management. I spent some time with the NCAA, Sports Corps, the Black Coaches Association, the Olympics, and then was appointed to the governor's office when Ms. Daniels was in office, and then appointed to run the Civil Rights Commission and do some things. So for an inner city kid from Dayton, Ohio, who came from where I came from, I've been pretty blessed. But we've sent this thing into motion, and we're really excited about it. So, in light of this conversation about the impact of sport and what it provides, right? I mean, there's tons of research out, that talks about the benefit of sport. Talks about how kids who are engaged in play sport, they test better. Research says that academically their grades are higher. Research also says their attendance is better. They're more likely to graduate, less likely to drop out. It also says that they're less likely to experiment with drugs and alcohol. They're less likely to become teenage parents. Other things that I look at are what I call the intrinsic pieces, the growth and social development. Confidence. And confidence is key in any area of life, regardless of what you do. You can be the smartest guy in the world. You can actually be the smartest guy or girl in the world and not be comfortable or confident in your environment and not live up to your potential. So it gives you the opportunity to break out of that shell, to be able to interact in front of large crowds, be surprised at how many of the young men we get the opportunity to coach in the beginning of the season have an issue with eye contact. Because that's something that we emphasize. By the end of the season, they're staring you in your soul, which is one of the beautiful things that I actually love. The ability to work within a team setting has often been found in research, as well as interactions with authority and a good understanding of what that means. And so one of the things that, and I'll talk about the percentages here within the district before, but there was a study, the NCAA did it, and they interviewed, they said 50 of the top Fortune 500 HR VPs around the country and said, all things considered equal, who would you hire? Someone who has had the opportunity and willingly participated in sport, or their counterparts? And 99.9% of them said, all things considered equal, someone who plays sports. And they followed up and said, why? He said, well, within a job setting, especially if some that have some high anxiety and high tension, I know that at some point along that person's life that the clock has been ticking, they've been up or down a point, the ball's been in their hand, and they've got to perform. I know that sometime in their life, someone has yelled at some instructions at them in the heat of a moment, and they've had to adjust or perform. I know that sometime in the middle of their life, they've had to either count on someone else or someone else has had to count on them to produce. And all of those intangible benefits are largely largely valued in the setting. So, considering all those benefits that come with it, they also talk about how people who participate are more employable, which I found interesting. So if all those things are true, then indirectly what you do is have an opportunity to help not only support the people who participate, but again, the schools that they, and the districts that they attend, the cities they live in, and the communities they live and work and play in as well. We piloted in 2014. I was appointed co-chair of the Your Life Matters piece for the city, and part of it we had to pull together the task force. We focused on a few areas. Health and mental health was one. Education was another. Employment was another. Juvenile justice was another. I'm missing some. Oh, mentoring was another. And a lot came out of this, and this is before we established the Lead Change Project in its official capacity. But a few things came out that were I don't want to say alarming, but some aha moments for me as a co-chair of this. And I was surrounded by people who were experts and knew far more than I did in this area. And we pulled tons of research and surveyed all kinds of folks. This shows how it talked about the mentoring component. Evidence shows that disconnected children who do receive a high-quality early childhood education are 25% more likely to drop out of school, 40% more likely to become a teen parent, 50% more likely to be placed in special education, 60% more likely to never attend college, and 70% more likely to be arrested for a violent crime. The operative word there is disconnected. And so we dug into what that meant. And from an educational standpoint, it meant how many folks are actually engaged in their educational experience, like what's going on. If they're disconnected, it means they're not attending school, they might be skipping school, or they're disconnected literally sitting in the classroom, so they're not engaged, they're not getting it, and the more they don't get it, the more they don't want to get it, and that trickle effect happens. And when that happens, all of these statistics, they say, ring true. And I was going, wow. Then we kept going. Talked about education, and black male students disproportionately experience exclusionary discipline practices. Black male students are disproportionately identified for special education. Students identified with disabilities disproportionately experience exclusionary discipline practices. Suspension and expulsion. It talked about how, I believe the number was some 70% in the gap between specifically inner city youth, black men between the ages of 14 and 18 and their counterparts. And so then that caused us to peel back the layer of onions about suspension and expulsion, because that was kind of the first domino to a tier of things, right? So what happened is the suspension and expulsion numbers were so high, which meant they were literally kicking kids out of class and inevitably kicking kids out of school. Well, typically when they're not in school, I mean, it's logic, right? Nobody here is a dummy, right? You're out of school, you're not learning. If you're not learning, when you come back, you're behind. If you're behind, it's natural for someone to kind of become disengaged. Remember that first part that we talked about, that disengage you. And the more you become disengaged, the more you withdraw. The more you withdraw, the more you don't attend. Attendance drops, right? And the more that drops, then the less likely you are to test well, score well. And the percentages or the likelihood that you drop out inevitably skyrocket. They'd argue that ties completely back to suspension and expulsion. Then we said, well, why are they getting suspended and expelled? So we pulled the state statute, and it's an exhaustive list of things that you can, that they list for suspension and expulsion. Everything from, some of it, in my opinion, didn't warrant suspension and expulsion, but just in fairness, it listed, things like, it listed all the weapons, right? So it would be exhaustive. Like, it wouldn't just say gun. It would be like handgun, rifle, like pistol, revolver. It's like all these guns. Then it would list knives and the different kind of knives. And then fights, disruption. It listed everything that you could possibly suspend a kid for. And then it was like this vague category called other, right? That you could also list. Guess what the number one reason for suspending and expelling kids were? Other. And we go, if this list is this exhaustive, what could possibly have been in the other piece? Oh, and then this one was a cool one too, right? Rank number 3 was attendance. How ironic is that? So because you're not in school, I'm just going to go ahead and kick you out of school for a little bit more time. Just so that you become more disengaged, you fall further behind, so that when you get back in, you're withdrawn, right? Then I kick you out again. Then you are, let me go back. 70% more likely to be arrested for a violent crime. It'll take a rocket science to connect those dots, right? I got a 4-year-old, she take the thing and then connect the dots. So here's the beauty. We started to pilot it. I was asked to go over to Arsenal Tech. First went over to Washington High School. We were there for a year. But I'll jump right over to the tech piece. When we got over to the first year for tryouts, freshman JV and varsity tryouts, we had 14 kids show up, total. Wait a minute, y'all didn't hear what I said. Y'all didn't hear what I said. 14, this is the largest high school in the largest district in the state of Indiana. 14 kids showed up for tryout. 14 kids. So we asked, we said, I was asking, what's going on? And at the time, if you guys recall, there was, up in the Castleton Mall, there was a lot of break-in or some thefts and some fights out in the parking lot, and there was this, the community got involved. Oh, the kids don't have nothing to do, and it was all this stuff, and I'm going, man, that's BS. I call BS. When you play the card game, BS, put it down. And when I asked, I said, well, the kids aren't interested anymore. And I go, BS. So I took a week off work, true story, took a week off work, and I went and I posted flyers around the school. We would hand some out, right? And I would challenge kids to one-on-one contest. And the interesting thing is, number 41 was already there. He was a kid already there. He was like a perennial All-American. And you would think, like, if you want to go play with anybody, anywhere, like, you want to go play with that kid. Even if I sucked, right? Like, I sucked, and if the numbers are low, I might have a chance to make it anyway. Like, I'm going to play with that kid. And even he couldn't draw the numbers. So we recruited. We went out, we passed some flyers out. I would challenge him in a one-on-one contest. If you can beat me, I'll buy you a pair of Jordans. I had that on the flyer. If you beat me, you buy a pair of Jordans. I didn't buy one single pair of Jordans. I beat the mess out of every kid that showed up. I couldn't explain that to my wife. I had to go home and buy a bunch of pair of Jordans. But anyway, so we fielded the team, and we started to insert what we consider to be the baseline for the lead change project, right? We took a baseline of the grades for the team cumulatively, right? So, and as a team, the GPA hovered somewhere around 1.5 at the time. Now, which was really surprising, because we had a few young men were like scholar athletes. I mean, they were 3.8s and 3.9s or better, which lets you know how bad the bottom half had to be to draw that down, right? So we implemented credit recovery. The head coach was amazing. He had some credit recovery pieces. We did some social development deals, like we'd make the kids get dressed up, and we took them downtown to a fancy restaurant, and we had etiquette teaching, etiquette training, which fork to use and how to, appropriate dinner etiquette, dinner conversation, so on and so forth. We would take them to the museum. We did a lot of things off the court. We would have guest speakers come in and talk to them about just life in general, some social skills. We did resume building. We had a conversation about social media. I know we had that conversation, Kristin, a little bit ago, and the importance of being responsible for the message that you put out about yourself. Like, all these things, were built in. I'm getting ahead of the deal. And 3 years later, so everyone talked about the state championship, which was amazing. It was the first time Tech had ever won it all. The district hadn't had one in more than 30 years. It was one hell of a ride, let me tell you. But I always tell people, as amazing as that wasn't the story. The real story was kind of the undercurrent. The fact that we went from an accumulative 1.5 GPA to an accumulative 3.2 GPA. 3 years later, we had 11 seniors, most of which were there in the beginning as sophomores. All 11 of our seniors graduated, and all had scholarship offers to go to school. All 11 went, no, actually, I'm sorry. 10 of the 11 went. One decided to go to the military, which we commended as well. And then that year in tryouts, we had 122 kids show up for tryouts. The culture was set. It was so different, in fact. We had kids who showed up who honestly couldn't chew gum and walk at the same time. There was one dude, one kid, Demetrius, I'll never forget. Great kid, but Demetrius had to be maybe 5 feet tall, maybe 5 feet, and he was pushing 3 bills. He was a big kid. And basketball was, other sports might have been his cup of tea. Basketball just wasn't it. And he comes to me, he says, Coach, he says, man, I know I'm not gonna make it. He says, I know I'm not gonna make it. He goes, but I just want to be a part of the program. So, and I missed this part too. What we did in the beginning, we have all the boys sign contracts. Every kid who participates has to sign a contract. And the contract stipulates all of the expectations for the program, right? What you'll do academically. Be in class on time, respect your teachers, respect your classmates, all the on-the-court things, be at practice on time, respect your teammates, respect your coaches. We mandate community service. We have all our boys during the season. We tried to get in a few, but at a minimum we did one collective community service event with all the boys every season. So all these things. So when all the other kids came in, like Demetrius, who wanted to be a part of it, we made a spot on the team for him. He was like, the equipment guy, and he helped manage the team. He had to sign the same contract. He had to maintain the same academic standings. He had to do the same community service. And you know what? He did it. He never batted an eye. He never batted an eye because he wanted to be a part of the program. And that told me everything I needed to know. It confirmed everything my mother had incidentally done, because the truth be told, almost 30 years ago, when we're having this conversation, when my mother is waking me up, telling me what I had to do, for her, me playing ball was a built-in babysitter of sorts. Because in her mind, me getting out of school at 2:45, right? And coming back home to the apartment complex we lived in, and her not getting home for another 8 to 9 hours later, just spelled disaster for her. So her logic said, but for God, take your butt to practice. Because if you go to practice, you're not getting home till 7, 8 o'clock, maybe, depending on how the bus flows. You're tired, you're hungry, and you don't have very much time, if any, to do anything disruptive. And by golly, it worked. And this experience as an adult now, being able to convey some of this, and we would talk about a lot of these expectations with the young man, was proof and evidence for me that if administered correctly, and if the appropriate support mechanisms are put in place, it's just as effective. I mean, let's think about it. It transcends gender and race, socioeconomic status. Because I think any kid who does it can benefit from it, right? But I'd argue, like for example, my kids right now don't face the same ordeals that I faced at their age, right? So if a school doesn't offer, for example, a sport to play, no problem. Dad will find somewhere for you to participate. And that's true in most suburbs and townships and things where parental engagement is a little bit more far-fetched. Because the understanding of what that support mechanism means for our kids. But if in fact it's true, then I'd argue that the kids who need that support mechanism the most aren't getting it. So that's when I pitched to the school board to come in and insert the Lead Change Project for the district. So, current landscape. So the national average, first thing we did was we assessed, we looked at the country and kind of what's been going on, the lay of the land. The national average, or the national percentage for participation is 55. So 55% of kids around the country, a little bit more than half, plays something. Plays something. These are all the things that we looked at. In IPS, that number is 18%. 18% of the kids in the district participate. So what does that mean? That means only 18% of our kids get the academic, physical, mental, social support. Now, you have some that can survive without it, no doubt. And I should preface this by saying I don't think the participation in sport is the magic silver bullet that cures all ills. So I don't want to come off that way either. But I do believe that all things considered, it is a huge, huge help. So that translates to about 4,700 kids that just go home every day at 2:45. And just to get to the national average, just to get to 55%, that's an additional 2,000. Wouldn't that be great? So, with that, our strategic plan is laid out in a few different areas. Our number one objective is to increase participation. Our number one goal is to engage more of our students and transform more of them into student athletes. The beauty of it is, of that 18% are some very committed, very loyal, very energetic, very charismatic young men and young women who are playing multiple sports and excelling in every way imaginable. Some of which coming from some shaky circumstances, but excelling nonetheless. We also look to expand the district community and corporate footprint. The beauty thing about it, one of the things I talked about, what we did with the boys, is we engaged in community service. The idea there is, for me, obvious, right? Because one of the messages that we would talk to the kids is, again, life happens. It's true, some people get dealt a better hand than others. But no matter where you think you are, how bad you think you've got it, trust me, you don't have to look too far to find somebody who's got it a hell of a lot worse than you do. So, no matter how bad you think your hand is, someone could benefit from it. So the best thing you can do is sow seed and take some of your time and your talent and go and help somebody who may be in a worse position than you. One of the best and most, I think, fulfilling community service projects that we would do with the boys is, so we tried to think of a way to make the community service, a little bit more fun and engage them a little bit more. So we would have the captains pick a cause, something that they wanted to rally around. One year was sickle cell, because we found that one of the kids on the team had sickle cell. One year it was, actually a couple years it was cancer, and who hasn't been touched, whether directly or indirectly, by cancer. And so we were blessed with an opportunity to go to Riley's, to visit Riley's, I always mess that word up, a little country underneath me, to visit some of the young people who were battling cancer. And the cool part was when we did it twice. When we would leave, and we would spend some time. We would take jerseys and shirts for some of the younger kids, and just swap stories and just talk about life. We let them do it. Actually, us as the adults didn't do much of anything. And when we would leave, they would come out and a couple of the kids, and it was always one of the kids who was really dealing with some stuff. I'll just say stuff, right? They would always come out and say, "Man, coach, dude, I'm never gonna complain again." I said, "Well, what you mean?" He said, my pops is foul, he hasn't been around, or, mom's is struggling, or, I'm dealing with X, Y, and or Z. But so-and-so got 30 days to live, yo. And there's nothing she can do about it. Talk about a humbling experience. Very, very impactful. And in exchange, we built some really good rapport with our boys. When it was time to go to college, we had a number of time for them to go to college. We had a number of the folks that we did community service projects for and or with that wrote letters of recommendation for our boys. Some without even having to ask, just wanted to support. And so growing that corporate footprint is huge. And then facilitate partnerships with higher ed and increase the number of athletic-based scholarships that we have. When I played way back in the day, right, nowadays they have like the ESPN 100, you can just click on and figure out who's good, who's not. Back then there was a magazine called Street and Smith. If you're athletes, Street and Smith. And it was this little publication that came out. And if you made it in Street and Smith, oh man, you was hot stuff. And I'll never forget, I was way down like 97 or something like that. But I was in Street and Smith. And I was so excited to be in Street and Smith magazine. But nowadays, there's between social media and all the rankings and ESPN and seeing CBS Sports and the number of colleges and the way that it's marketed, it's a billion-dollar business now. There's tons of opportunities for kids to go. And it doesn't have to be, I didn't even mention the schools our kids went to, because let me just be honest, all of them didn't go to the University of Kentucky, right? But there's D2s and D3s and NAIA schools and JUCOs, D1s and NAIA D1, D2, JUCO D1. There's opportunities to go further your education. That we want to make sure we do a better job of leveraging that opportunity for many of our kids because they deserve it. They absolutely deserve it. So I'll wrap up with this. In light of the conversation, before we get to Q&A, in light of the conversation, one of the things that I praise gatherings like this for is that for you to come, you're obviously engaged, right? There's something about an issue that you take to heart. There's something about the world or the communities that you live in and the cities that you live in that causes you to want to be engaged. I want to figure out how to help. I had somebody tell me not too long ago that, because we were having this conversation about, what is it? Like, what's the main issue? And someone said to me, apathy. Apathy is it, man. He said it's the byproduct of what he called social impotence. And this feeling of powerlessness. and feeling that way for so long, you just kind of go, que sera, sera. Just become apathetic to the things that are happening over and over again. I always tell this story. So in the neighborhood we grew up in, there was one hoop court in the middle of the little projects that we grew up in, right? And every day we would go play, and the younger guys, we would go out early to play because we know when the older guys came, they would kick you off, right? So we would get up early and go, and I was at the time I was a little serious about my game, so it would really make me mad that they wouldn't let me play. I was about 11 or 12. This is really what kind of jump started my little reputation, if you will, in the neighborhood. So this one day, I'm out there playing, I'm going through, me and a couple other younger guys were playing, and inevitably all the older kids start coming. And when I say older kids, I mean anybody from 18 to 48. Like, you just got grown men coming, half of them are drunk and whatever, but they're a lot bigger, a lot stronger, a lot older than we are. And they'll come, and the rules of the playground is you call next. Look, when you play, look, hey, I got next. So I would say, hey, I got next, and they would just completely dismiss the fact that I existed, right? And they just go on about their business. And I was just so sick and tired of them, just dismissing me. So this one day, same thing happened. They came, they started to play. I'm yelling, I got next. I mean, they didn't even go as far as even acknowledge, just even say, man, get out of here. Let's do nothing. They just completely ignored it. So as they were getting ready to start, I ran up, I grabbed that ball, and I kicked it, boom, all the way out into the woods, in the back of the woods behind the thing. And then they chased my butt home, and I ran as fast as I could all the way home. The very next day, I'm out there early again. Same thing happened. They came, I called next. They ignored me. They go to play. I grabbed it, I chucked it again, and I ran home. The very next day, it's about to happen again. I'm there early. They come, I call next. They go ready to play, and I grab the ball. One guy said, whoa, wait, hold on. Let the little dude play. Just let the little dude play, and let's see. And at that moment, it was like make or break time, right? And I wasn't just playing for me. I was playing for every little dude who had aspirations to play with those older kids. And if I had a bad game, we would never have a chance to play again. I had the game of my life. I had the game of my life, y'all. But that's not the story. I just like to tell that part. The story is, next to that court was a parking lot, hangout spot. And one day, so in that too, and one of the reasons I tell it is, one of my biggest cheerleaders, if you will, was a cat named David Shepard. Guy named David Shepard, and some of you may have heard me tell the story before. But Shep was by no means an athlete. But he was kind of like the militant of the neighborhood. He wasn't but 13, 14 years old, but he was just righteous, right? And ahead of his time, and he just cared about stuff. I don't even know if he really understood what he was talking about, but he cared, right? And he would speak out against cats dealing dope in the parking lot in the neighborhood, and he would speak out about guys' foul language, and especially in front of mothers or what have you. You guys need to eat better, and you need to. He was 14. He was just righteous, just righteous. At some point, he would get on everybody's nerves, like, man, Shep, shut up. But he cared. So one day, Shep, myself, and a guy named Tom just, it was before they let me play. So we're sitting, watching them play, and calling them all kind of names because we can't play, right? So we're just standing there and just watching, and as we're sitting there talking, a guy walks up and he shoots Tom in the face, and Tom's half his face is on me, his blood on me, and I'm froze. And all I remember is Shep going, "Hey," and I'm like, I'm in shock. And he's saying, "Hey," and he's holding Tommy in his arms. He's holding him, and he says, go get his mama, go get his mama. And I snapped out of it, and I took off running. And I ran through the apartments, and I ran all the way to Tommy's apartment, and I knock on the door, and his mother comes to the door, and immediately, like, she starts crying. And I'm crying. I got half of Tommy's face on me, and I'm bloody. And I'm grabbing her by the hand, and she's breaking down. She won't walk, and I'm trying to pull her, and I'm crying, and it was just this whole scene. And we got back, and the one person, when everybody else scattered, there was one guy standing there still holding Tommy in his arms. That was Shep. Shep stood tall when nobody else would. I mean, he stood tall, and he didn't care. He stood there, and even after the aftermath, he went around, he was handing out flyers and talking to people about finding the guy who shot him, and, you know, Shep was just engaged. Well, a few years ago, I went back home, and I ran into Shep. And he was a shell of himself. Didn't really have much to say. Wasn't really engaged. He had kind of this gloss over his eyes. He asked me for $20, and I took him, you know, we went to go grab something to eat. I said, man, come on, let's go eat. We chopped it up for a minute, and, you know, we just had a bunch of I don't know responses. And it bugged me, y'all. I mean, it really, really bothered me. And I remember driving home that day, driving from Ohio all the way back to Indy. And I was trying to, in my mind, think like, you know, because that wasn't a dude that I grew up with. You know what I mean? And what could have happened between now and then? Because he never did time, like none of that. Like what happened between then and now? And it hit me. He had been fighting in his mind, he had been fighting for so long and spinning his wheels for so long. He had kind of morphed into that thought of social impotence. So it was just apathetic. He had given up. He had given up on his cause. And I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot in my young life. Some good, a lot good, some bad, but a lot good, a whole lot good, some bad. But I don't think I've ever seen anything that resonated like seeing a guy that I knew at one point was so vibrant, so connected, so righteous, if you will, so loving, so caring, to be so none of that. And to go from one extreme to the other was just sad to me. So if there's anything that I leave you guys with, is keep caring. Stay engaged. Even when the road looks long, tow it. Even when the fight seems hard, keep fighting. Stay engaged. Spend some time, volunteer, sow some seed. Keep fighting. Because your ability to stay engaged is the difference between the Shep I knew 25 years ago and the guy I ran into a few years ago. Thank you guys for the time. I appreciate it.
Before we need to wrap up for the award ceremony, so does anyone have any questions?
Yes, ma'am.
So you've got a strong basketball program going, and I see what the other expansions are. What about developing programs for young women?
Yeah, so the goal is to expand, because the beauty about sport is it doesn't discriminate. And so we want to grow. In fact, we have some Title IX issues within the district. And I did find out it's not just because most urban inner city districts have Title IX issues, and it's really wrapped around facilities and facility options and things of that nature. So we want to make sure that we do build strong strong women's programs across the board, and really survey some of our young ladies and get a feel for what their topics of interest are, what engages them mostly, and make sure that we wrap and include really good coaches, provide coaches with really good training, and provide opportunities for them to engage, just like the young men do. Yes, ma'am.
Parents help.
Yes, I'll get to that point in just a second. That's a very good point. Yes, ma'am. And then back there.
I had the chance to student teach at Marion 10 years ago, and my parents were both teachers, and I was just dumbfounded at how poor the facility was. I mean, I've never seen such a badly equipped school in terms of, like, I had 3 different editions of the textbook in my classroom. At one point, one of the girls invited me to come watch her run track. I went to go watch a pep rally. I had been active in my high school. I mean, I wasn't a superstar, but I was in several clubs. And I asked my students, what do you do? What extracurricular? Hardly anybody did anything. And when I went to this pep rally, I was just astounded. The girls, the cheerleaders had, they had uniforms. But my high school was not an outstanding public school. It was fairly mediocre. It was fairly rural. But, they at least had, what do you call them, bullhorns or whatever, with their name on them, and pom-poms, and they would go to cheerleader camp every summer. I don't know if these gals went to cheerleader camp, but they had nothing, no props. I know today's cheerleaders, they didn't in my time, but today's cheerleaders do a lot of gymnastics and nothing. And to see the contrast, it was deeply saddening to me to see that, cheerleading at most schools is a sport, but with what they had to do, it really wasn't a sport. I mean, it was just very, very sad. And so I know IPS has serious funding issues, and my thought is that that's probably the main thing that's behind that. Anyway, the funding and the resources that these girls have is just really sad.
Yeah. We do have some work to do. I guess I'm fairly, I've been at it for about 9 months now. We've really spent the first 8 really just assessing, so we get a good baseline. There's a need for some facilities updates, equipment, uniforms, things of that nature. My job is not to relish on the lack, but look at the potential. There's a lot of wonderful folks, both individual and corporate, who I think are willing to support. I've had some really good conversations with some folks. And our job is to start to build around, the potential of the district, and not just so that kids can play, but really conveying to people that through that involvement comes all these other benefits, some direct and some indirect. So, great point. Certainly appreciate that. I think the young lady in the back.
Can you tell me how you keep the parents involved and engaged with their kids that are at the schools? I know, I'm just talking from my own experience with my own son, and I saw the difference in the township parent involvement compared to the inner city schools. My niece is at a IPS school now, and one of her challenges is to keep the parents involved in what's going on with the kids during the class time. So I was wondering how you address that, or if it is a challenge for you.
It is a challenge. But you know what? I think if there is a way to bridge that gap, it's through sport. I think one of the interesting things are, again, if we faced it at Tech, so we didn't have a whole lot in the beginning of parental support. But when we started to build the program, and we started to engage the kids in things on and off the court. In fact, the contract that we have the kids sign has to be signed by the kids as well as the parents. The interesting part about that is, and they can't play until it's signed, by the parents. The interesting part about that is some of them will come in complaining about it, which is great, because we take that opportunity to provide them with other information that they may need. And then what happens as the program started to build, we found that the parents were more and more engaged, sometimes a little bit too much engaged, but that was a good thing. And so one of our goals is to make sure we do that at a macro level across the entire district. So I think we'll see. Oh, I'm sorry, I was told this is the last question. If you guys want to combine them, I'll do that. How about that?
So you were starting with kids with very low GPAs. How do you get around the restrictions of you have to have a GPA of X in order to participate?
So do you want to add on to hers so that I can answer both?
My question was about, we have a couple of schools where from the juvenile center, the children are pipelined into those schools. They have no sports. And the only way they calm those kids down, because I had a client in there, is stick them in the gym and let them run and play basketball until they fall out, but they have nothing. They have no programs in.
At the juvenile center. So the first part of that question, that one question, was the grade point average. So what we did was, because the rules are the rules, we took the kids, and I'm a big proponent, man, if you've got the desire and the talent, obviously, right, to play, and willing to commit, because we ask a lot of the boys. I mean, there's times we're up at 5 in the morning, and you got to beat me to the gym. Days are long, we're in the weight room, we're running community service, we're doing things off time, so you're committed. But until you make the grade, you can't play. So you can practice. You can practice, you can commit. So one of the best motivators is having to go through the grind, right? And you see the carrot of being able to play in front of you. It's like, yo, I'm gonna get it. So we put kids on credit recovery. And we had one of the kids that was in the picture when we got him. His GPA was so low the counselor didn't think he was enrolled. Like when we went to go get him, I'm going, yo, I need you to find, because we needed his GPA. He's like, he doesn't go here. I go, ma'am, he goes here. I need you to find his information. Once we found it, we got him going. The crazy part is, he's actually a brilliant kid. Here's how brilliant he was. Follow me here. By the time he's a senior, he was a sophomore at that time when we got him. He maintains a 3.0 the entire time we get him. His senior year, the kid scores the highest ACT score in the school, higher than the valedictorian. His ACT score was so high, they accused him of cheating, which pissed me off. And typically what I did was I would separate, because at the time I'm executive director of the Civil Rights Commission, right? So that's my professional life, and me coaching and mentoring was always my personal piece, so I typically kept those separate. But I had to warn the folks. I said, if we isolate this kid like this, then I will resign my duties as an assistant basketball coach, and you'll get a letter from the head of the Civil Rights Commission, and we'll have a more serious conversation about that. But I bring that up to say that in many cases, it's just it's the environment and the platform for which they're given to succeed. So we pulled no punches with him. He had to be there at 5 in the morning. And here's the crazy part: when he was in credit recovery, he had to be there at 5 in the morning, and before he can get on the floor, he had to finish work, classroom work. Then he can practice, and he has to make up all the practice work that he didn't get while the other kids were on the floor, and he did it. He did it because it was a part of a program. We just rolling the ball out. It was a part of a program that he truly wanted to be involved in, and that hook, which was the game that he loved, was what we used to get him everything else that he needed. So it can be done, even for those kids. I talked about health when we did it to answer your question, because I do think it helps the mental health. In the spirit of full disclosure, my wife and I adopted 2 kids. We already had 2. We adopted 2. My new son, I think, my son, he had all these labels when we got him. He's severely ADHD. He can't do this. Keep in mind, he had medicine like he was a 30-year diabetic. All these medicine bottles. I told my wife, I said, hey, we're going to pray about this thing, but I'm not shoving those pills down my son. Right? And 2 things are going to happen. If I tell us about to sit still, he better sit still. That's 1. And 2, I think I've got something to get that out. He just needed to let loose. So we put him in a whole bunch of things. He hadn't taken the pill since. Let him be a year now. Kids doing fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. But again, kind of adopted from my mother. In my house, they got to play something every season. So, you know, and then we're on the block, I just let him go. I let him go and let him go. And I tell him, hey, when it's time to sit, I need you to sit and focus and pay attention. Now, is he a kid? Does he get into some stuff? Yeah, that's what kids do, right? But it doesn't warrant shoving all that stuff down his mouth. Now, I'm not saying that some don't need it, but I do know that the research says that specifically black boys are disproportionately diagnosed with that. And I bet if there was some physical activity inserted, you'd have far less that needed it. Thank you guys, and God bless you. I certainly appreciate it.